The Fine Cotton affair of 1984 is a ring-in scandal the racing industry will never forget. A quick horse named Bold Personality made up with hair dye and spray paint to run in place of a much slower horse, Fine Cotton, to cash in on the highest possible odds. While in this example of classic racing cheatery there was no keeping the cat in the bag, on the flip side of the same cheat coin, in greyhound racing, ring-ins are rife with board stewards and other officials covering it up. In one such example in 2007, David Keep, a greyhound breeder and trainer for over 50 years, reached out to Doc Jamieson when learning of his inquiry with the Greyhound Racing Authority. At the time, Doc was being set up in a false inquiry by GRA officials at Bundaberg, conspiring to tarnish Doc's name, disrupt his racing, and bully Doc into silence to stop him from exposing the deep state of corruption within the industry. David offered to support Doc in his inquiry by providing supporting evidence against the GRA and showing how they had covered up a name-switching error, turning it into a statewide undercover scandal, among other dishonest conduct.
I can give you the documents that I sent to the Ombudsman.
Yes.
It's got all the dates, it tells you everything, right? If you can bring that out to the judge and say, you read this about how they cover up what's happening in greyhound racing.
Yep.
It's never happened. I bet you cannot tell me one case in chronic galloping or greyhound racing where a person has won a race with the wrong animal and been allowed to keep the prize money and not fined.
In 1992, David successfully appealed a decision by GRA stewards in an inquiry against him where he was denied natural justice by being deprived of the right to cross-examine opposing witness. David's appeal was upheld by the Ombudsman, overruling the decision of the stewards. This should have set a precedent, but 12 years later, the same regulatory integrity was no longer in the best interest of authority. In 2004, David was yet again denied natural justice in another appeal against a decision by stewards, this time with one of the panel stewards who was under scrutiny of the complaint being switched out of records, as well as the entire panel being unavailable for cross-examination, instead being represented by Chief Steward Danny Ryan. Then, when David questioned proceedings, he was flatly refused the right to due process by the GRA chair at the time, Kerry Watson. David again took the matter to the Ombudsman, but this time the Ombudsman simply dropped his case, apparently seeing, quote, no evidence of maladministration on the part of the GRA. Then came the matter of a greyhound mistaken identity cover-up. Two of the dogs in a litter of pups bred by David had their names accidentally switched around before being given away to other trainers. The dogs' names were Wacky Frog and Reet Petite.
What happened with me? I bred a litter of dogs, right?
Yeah.
Now when I started racing them, I raced the first one I raced at Albion Park was a race, right? Then I give it 2 more starts before I give her away.
Yeah.
And then the sister, I gave 2 starts to. I gave 1 start at Bundaberg and 1 start at Albion Park before I give them away.
Yeah.
But when I gave the dog away, I was racing the wrong dogs.
Okay.
In 2006, one of the dogs, actually Wacky Frog, was entered into a race at the Gold Coast as Reet Petite. The steward at the race meeting, Gail Thorsby, initially questioned the identity of the dog, but then allowed it to race, only for it to later be discovered that it was actually Wacky Frog. An inquiry was opened where the naming discrepancy was uncovered and both dogs were stood down until the investigation was completed, with the trainer of Wacky Frog, Robert Wall, receiving a warning only to ensure correct identification of the dogs in his establishment in future.
Danny Ryan put a steward's report out in the journal
Yeah.
to say that the wrong dog raced at the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
I knocked him away. They woke up those the wrong dogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was published on the internet. And on that internet it said that these 2 dogs raced under the wrong names.
Yeah.
Right?
When the inquiry came out in the journal, David realised that somewhere along the line a terrible error had been made. David came forward to the GRA to have the matter corrected, ready to face any consequences resulting from his mistake. Strangely, David was not faced with any repercussions and was to leave the matter in the hands of the GRA. The following year, in 2007, during a race at Albion Park, whilst handling the 3-dog, C. Clay, David observed that the dog in the 1 box, racing under the name Wacky Frog, was actually Reet Petite. David raised the matter to the head steward of the day, who just so happened to be Gail Thorsby, the same steward who flagged Wacky Frog as the wrong dog at the Gold Coast in 2006. Gail refused to accept David's complaint.
About 2 months ago, I was raced at a dog in an Albion Park called C. Clay.
Yep.
And the dog in box 1 was Wacky Frog. That should have been Reet Petite. They ran the wrong dog.
Oh, okay.
So I kept meeting, I went in to make an official complaint,
Yep.
and they wouldn't accept it.
Ah.
They wouldn't let me make an official complaint. They told me come back later with the tape on. I went back later. They said, we're not going to accept your official complaint. I said, that's the wrong dog to race. I said, I've read them. I know it.
Yep.
I said, and you just know it, right?
Yep.
So what they should have done with me, they should have took my complaint, if it was wrong, charged me with making a frivolous complaint, shouldn't they?
Exactly right.
If I wasn't right,
Yes.
they should have said, you've made a frivolous complaint, we're going to charge you.
That's right.
So what they do? Nothing.
Once again, David took matters to the Ombudsman, but this time, having already experienced the questionable conduct of both the Greyhound Racing Authority and the Ombudsman, he also raised the matter with the local MP. David was given the runaround, with the Ombudsman redirecting him back to the GRA and the local MP redirecting him to the Minister for Racing. Then, after an inevitable and unsatisfactory result with the GRA General Manager Darren Beavis, David returned to the Ombudsman to push the issue. David this time provided irrefutable evidence detailing the scandal. During the investigation of 2006, at no time was the official Greyhound marker and brander, Graham Haswell, asked to give evidence, despite that he had marked and ear-branded both dogs at 3 months of age, again at 12 months for naming, and also checking each dog against racing papers before they were cleared to race. Despite both greyhounds being investigated and stood down a year earlier, up until this latest complaint from David, both dogs continued to race under the wrong names. Wacky Frog, actually Reed Petite, for a further 27 races, and Reed Petite, actually Wacky Frog, a further 23 races. David himself unknowingly ran both dogs over a total of 5 races under the wrong names before giving them away, but at no time was their identity questioned, not even during the investigation.
So when it came out the jail that that wrong dog had raced, I rang up Debbie Ryan and said, well, that needs to say you've got to scratch that dog for its previous 3 runs that I gave it, plus the other dog, it's 2 runs I gave it, so that's 5 dogs. They're going to be disqualified.
Yes.
So I said, the prize money that dog won at Albion Park, I have to give that back. Right? None of that happened. They covered all that up. I didn't get fined 1 penny or even asked to attend to an inquiry. The bloke that raced the dog at Gold Coast wasn't fined. He was given a reprimanded check. He got the right dog in future. My wife signed the first lot of documents and was never asked to sign new documents, so they were signed. The documents were incorrect too, right?
Yep.
I raced the wrong dogs on 5 occasions, and the stewards checked them, let them race.
Yep.
I won a race, and they checked 3 times. Right?
Yep.
So this involved all the stewards in Brisbane,
Yep.
the stewards in Bundaberg.
Yep.
Right?
This is where this is. Bundaberg, Stewarts, and here.
Yeah, this is what they cover up, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So, in my case, the person that failed to pick up the identification of the dogs was Cage,
Yep.
and he held the investigation,
Oh,
and he was involved in it.
same as what's happening now. Yep.
And they did not even mention the Bundaberg case where we were in the wrong dog. They didn't even mention those stewards.
Yep.
And they didn't mention the stewards at the Gold case where they picked up the wrong dog racing that day. So what they did, instead of scratching all them dogs, they went and changed their names. They turned Reed Petite into Wacky Frog and Wacky Frog into Reed Petite and issued new papers.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
The Ombudsman, satisfied with the GRA's handling of the matter, dropped David's case, and the Minister for Racing, satisfied with the Ombudsman's handling of the matter, wouldn't even look at it. No fines issued, no prize money returned, no correcting of records, and an unchanged Australian stud book reflecting dogs' names with the wrong racing record. The importance of stud book accuracy, key in the siring of litters for race candidates, was highlighted most prominently in the story of the Tony Lockett scandal of 1998. The AFL Stars breeding scam caused huge controversy among the greyhound racing community when breeders who paid to use the greyhound, Malawi's Prince, had their pups banned from breeding or suffered legal action from owners who bought what turned out to be the worthless progeny of the greyhound, Black Pirate. Assumedly in David Keep's case, the GRA seek to avoid the cost of time, money and resources in cleaning up the aftermath of a naming error that bled out into dozens of races. But whatever the reason, such a blatant and widespread cover-up begs the question, how many other cases like this are being covered up? And is the same thing going on in other states? Aren't you sick of corrupted enterprise scamming the industry right in front of your face, while those who are supposed to keep the industry clean sit on their hands and do nothing? Are you tired of watching the favourite trainers being handed the good boxes, while your dogs can't even get a fair go? You might feel powerless to change things, but there's plenty we can do about it. At the very least, sign the petition. It takes less than 30 seconds and every voice adds invaluable weight to the push for a royal commission into the fraud and misconduct rampant within the greyhound racing industry. If you've got dirt on race fixing, live baiting, greyhounds being killed, or anything to do with cover-ups and corruption in greyhound racing, we'd love to hear about it. Come forward and help us clean up greyhound racing once and for all. The honest greyhound people, and especially the animals and the greyhounds, deserve better than this. Stay tuned because soon we'll be going deep into the GRA's attack on Doc Jamieson, uncovering the conspiracy behind the false inquiry involving Kerry Watson, Danny Ryan, Daryl Kays, John Doss and Cameron McClune, as well as owner-trainers Bill Samuels and Narelle Mulcahy. We'll also be exposing Kerry Watson's orchestrated lawsuit against Doc and her collusion with the Chiropractors Board of Queensland.